When Maybeth Carter defied her town's prejudice for forbidden love, she never imagined it would spark a battle for their lives and their future. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun cast long shadows over Hollow Rock as Maybeth Carter swept the wooden porch of her father's general store. At 24, she was what the townspeople called past her prime for marriage, but that didn't bother her nearly as much as it bothered her parents. "Maybeth, make sure you dust those shelves properly today," her mother called from inside. "Pastor Williams and his wife are coming by later," Maybeth sighed. She knew what that meant. Another attempt to pair her with the pastor's nephew who had just moved to town. Another polite conversation where she'd smile and nod while her future was arranged without her input. "Yes, Mama," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. As she finished sweeping, she noticed a small group of men walking toward the trading post, across the street. Among them was Toka, the Lakota man who had come to Hollow Rock 2 winters ago with his grandfather. Unlike the others in town, he walked with a quiet dignity that always caught her attention. Her father stepped onto the porch, following her gaze. His face hardened. "Get inside, Maybeth," he said firmly. "Those Indians are here to trade again." "They're just people, Pa," she said softly. Her father's eyes narrowed. "They're not like us. You'd do well to remember that." Maybeth lowered her eyes and went inside, but not before catching Toka's glance. There was something in his dark eyes that spoke of understanding, of a world beyond the narrow confines of Hollow Rock. It made her heart beat a little faster. Later that afternoon, Maybeth carried a crate of kerosene lamps to the storage shed behind the store. The weight was more than she expected, and as she turned the corner, the crate slipped from her hands. Glass shattered across the dirt. "Oh no," she whispered, kneeling to gather the broken pieces. Her father would be furious. Suddenly, a shadow fell across her. Looking up, she found herself face to face with Toka. His expression was calm, his eyes the color of earth after rain. Without a word, he knelt beside her and began carefully picking up the larger shards. "You don't have to," she started. "I want to help," he said, his voice deep and accented but clear. It was the first time she'd heard him speak. They worked in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. His hands moved with purpose and grace, methodical in their care. "Thank you," she said when they finished. "My father wouldn't be happy to see you helping me." Toka stood, wiping his hands on his buckskin pants. "Most people here wouldn't." "I'm not most people," Maybeth said, surprising herself with her boldness. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "No, you're not." He walked away before she could respond, but something had changed in that brief moment. Something had begun. Over the next few weeks, Maybeth found reasons to be behind the store when Toka and his grandfather came to trade. Their conversations were brief at first, comments about the weather, the spring flowers blooming along the river. But soon they grew longer, deeper. Toka told her about his people, about the stars and how they guided travelers home. He showed her which plants could heal burns and which berries were safe to eat. She shared stories of books she'd read, dreams of places beyond the valley walls that surrounded Hollow Rock. They began to meet by the river, under the old juniper tree where no one from town ventured. There, hidden from judging eyes, they talked freely, and slowly, inevitably, they fell in love. "My grandfather says I'm a fool," Toka told her one warm evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the bluffs gold and pink. "He says your people will never accept me." Maybeth took his hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit with hers. "Maybe they just need time. If they knew you like I do." Toka shook his head. "I've seen what happens when our worlds try to mix. My mother died because settlers thought she was stealing their cattle. She was just trying to get home." "I'm sorry," Maybeth whispered, leaning her head against his shoulder. "My brother died in a raid 2 summers ago. Both sides claim the other started it." His voice was flat, but she felt the tension in his body. "Your town, these people, they see us as less than human." "I don't," she said firmly. "And maybe others can change too." Toka turned to her, his eyes serious. "Hope is dangerous, Maybeth. It can blind you to what's real, or it can help make things better, she countered. He smiled then, a rare and beautiful sight. You make me want to believe that. As spring turned to summer, their secret meetings continued. But in a town as small as Hollow Rock, secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. It began with whispers, sideways glances when Maybeth walked down the street, conversations that stopped when she entered the store. Then one Sunday after church, Mrs. Peterson, the banker's wife, approached Maybeth's mother. I hear your daughter has been spending time with that Indian, she said loudly enough for others to hear. Terrible business. Wild blood like that can only lead to trouble. Maybeth's mother went pale. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Maybeth is a good girl. Good girls don't consort with savages, Mrs. Peterson replied with a sniff. That night, Maybeth's father confronted her, his face red with anger. Is it true? He demanded. Have you been meeting with that Indian? His name is Toka, Maybeth said, her voice shaking but determined. And yes, I've been talking with him. He's kind and intelligent and— Enough! Her father shouted, slamming his fist on the table. No daughter of mine will shame this family by running around with a savage. He's not a savage, Maybeth protested. If you would just meet him— I want you to promise me you'll never see him again, her father interrupted. Promise me now, or you're no longer welcome in this house. Maybeth looked at her mother, hoping for support, but saw only fear and disappointment in her eyes. I can't promise that, she said quietly. Her father's face hardened. Then pack your things. You have until morning. That night, Maybeth cried in her small bedroom, surrounded by the familiar things of her childhood. But by dawn, her tears had dried. She packed a small bag with clothes and the few books she owned, then walked out of the only home she'd ever known. She found work at the tanner's shop on the edge of town, scrubbing hides for pennies a day. The owner, old Mr. Finch, let her sleep in the storage barn. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. The news of her disownment spread through Hollow Rock like wildfire. People who had known her all her life now crossed the street to avoid her. The church doors that had always welcomed her were suddenly closed. When she tried to buy bread at the baker's, Mrs. Baker told her flatly, "We don't serve your kind." What kind is that? Maybeth had asked, fighting back tears. Indian lovers, Mrs. Baker spat. You'll bear half-breed children and bring shame to this town. Only Toka stood by her. He brought her food when the stores refused her money. He patched the leaky roof of the barn when autumn rains came. And at night, when the loneliness threatened to crush her, he held her and promised that they would find a way. We could leave, he suggested one evening as they sat in the dimly lit barn. Go north to the territories. Find a place where people don't care so much about who loves who. Maybeth sighed, running her fingers over the rough wood of the small table Toka had built for her. This is my home. These people have known me my whole life. If we just stay, if they see that our love isn't something to fear— You still believe they can change? Toka said, his voice gentle but sad. I have to, she replied. Otherwise, what's left? As winter approached, life grew harder. The work at the tanner's slowed, and Maybeth's hands cracked from the cold and harsh chemicals. Food was scarce. Worst of all, rumors began to circulate that Toka's people were stealing cattle from the outlying farms. It's not true, Toka told her firmly when she asked. My grandfather and I are the only ones who come near this town, and we trade fairly for what we need. But the truth mattered little to those who wanted a reason to hate. Sheriff Davis began, stopping Toka whenever he came to town, searching him for stolen goods. The trading post owner started charging him double for supplies. One cold afternoon, as Maybeth was hanging up stiff hides to dry, she heard shouting from the main street. Heart pounding, she ran toward the commotion. A crowd had gathered around Toka, who stood calmly despite the anger directed at him. Farmer Jenkins was red-faced, jabbing a finger into Toka's chest. 3 of my best cows gone missing and tracks leading right toward your camp, Jenkins shouted. You think we're stupid? I haven't taken anything, Toka replied evenly. Neither has my grandfather. Liar! Jenkins lunged forward, but Sheriff Davis held him back. Now hold on, the sheriff said. We don't have proof yet. What more proof do you need? Jenkins demanded. Everyone knows Indians are thieves. Maybeth pushed through the crowd. That's not true. Toka's honest and hard-working. He would never steal. The crowd turned to her, faces twisted with disgust. Of course you'd defend him, Mrs. Peterson sneered. You've given up everything decent to lie with a savage. Don't speak to her that way, Toka warned, his voice low. Sheriff Davis stepped between them. I think you'd better leave town, boy. Folks are riled up, and I can't guarantee your safety. He hasn't done anything wrong, Maybeth protested. Maybeth! Toka's voice was gentle but firm. It's all right. I'll go. The crowd parted as Toka walked away, his back straight and proud, despite the hatred surrounding him. Maybeth tried to follow, but Jenkins grabbed her arm. You've made your choice, girl, he said coldly. You're not welcome here any more than he is. That night, Maybeth found Toka at their spot by the river. His face was bruised. Someone had caught up with him on the trail out of town. Who did this? She asked, gently touching his swollen cheek. It doesn't matter, he said. But we can't stay, Maybeth. It's not safe for either of us now. She knew he was right, but the thought of leaving, of giving up on her hope that things could change, felt like another loss on top of so many. Where would we go, she asked. North, he said. My mother's sister lives near the big lakes. She would welcome us. Maybeth nodded slowly. We'll need supplies, a few days to prepare. As they talked about their plans to leave, neither noticed the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Neither knew that 6 riders were making their way toward Hollow Rock, men hard with dust and whiskey and bad intentions, men who would change everything. The next morning dawned grey and cold. Maybeth was hanging the last of the hides when she heard it. Gunshots from the center of town, then screaming. Without thinking, she ran toward the sound. What she saw stopped her cold. 6 men on horseback were shooting into the air and at the ground near people's feet, making them dance in terror. One man lay bleeding on the boardwalk, Sheriff Davis clutching his shoulder. Listen up, shouted the leader of the riders, a tall man with a scar across his face. This town is ours now. We want all your valuables, all your money, and no heroes. Anyone tries anything, they'll end up worse than your sheriff. People scattered, running into buildings and locking doors. Maybeth ducked behind a water trough, her heart hammering in her chest. Where was Toka? Was he safe in his camp outside town? The bandits dismounted, kicking in doors and dragging people out of hiding. They were methodical in their cruelty, taking rings from women's fingers, watches from men's pockets. Mayor Wilson was found cowering in his office and forced to open the town's safe. Maybeth stayed hidden, watching in horror as the town that had rejected her now faced a threat far worse than their imagined fears. And then she saw him, Toka, moving, silently between buildings at the edge of town. He caught her eye and signaled for her to stay down. In his hands was his bow, an arrow already nocked. His eyes were no longer gentle. They were the eyes of a warrior, and Maybeth understood. Despite everything, he had come back, for her. Toka moved like a shadow between the buildings of Hollow Rock, his eyes fixed on the bandits terrorizing the Yao town. From his position he could see 6 men, rough-looking with guns drawn, forcing townspeople to hand over their valuables. The leader, a tall man with a jagged scar across his face, stood in the center of the street barking orders. Maybeth remained hidden behind the water trough, her heart racing as she watched Toka position himself on the roof of the blacksmith shop. She knew he was risking his life for a town that had shown him nothing but hatred, and he was doing it for her. Inside the general store, Maybeth's father stood protectively in front of her mother as 2 bandits ransacked the shelves. "Where's your money box, old man?" one of them demanded, shoving Mr. Carter against the counter. "In the back," he answered, his voice shaking. "I'll show you." "Pa," Mrs. Carter whispered fearfully as her husband was pushed toward the storeroom. Outside, the scar-faced leader had dragged young Sarah Williams from her hiding place behind a barrel. The 16-year-old struggled in his grip, tears streaming down her face. "Pretty little thing," the man said with a cruel smile. "Maybe we'll take you with us when we're done here." That was when the first arrow struck. It hit the ground between the leader's feet, burying itself deep in the dirt. Everyone froze. "Next one goes through your eye," Toka called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent street. He stood tall on the blacksmith's roof, another arrow already nocked. The leader pushed Sarah aside and drew his gun. "Well, look what we have here. An Indian who thinks he's brave." "Let the girl go," Toka said calmly. "Take what you've already stolen and leave this town." The leader laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the buildings. "You think one Indian with a bow can scare off 6 men with guns?" In answer, Toka let his second arrow fly. It struck the gun in the leader's hand, knocking it to the ground. The man howled in pain and surprise. "Get him!" he shouted to his men. Gunfire erupted as the bandits turned their weapons toward Toka. He rolled across the roof, disappearing from view. The townspeople scattered, seeking cover from the flying bullets. Maybeth saw her chance. While the bandits were distracted, she ran to Sarah Williams and pulled her behind the water trough. "Are you hurt?" she asked the trembling girl. Sarah shook, her head, her eyes wide with fear. Is that your Indian?" "His name is Toka," Maybeth said, "and he's trying to save us all." From his new position behind the chimney of the boarding house, Toka took aim at one of the bandits who was searching for him. His arrow struck true, hitting the man in the shoulder. The bandit screamed and dropped his gun. "Spread out," the leader ordered. "Find that Indian!" 2 of the bandits ran toward the boarding house while another headed for the church. The leader and the remaining uninjured man started kicking indoors, searching for Toka. Inside the general store, the 2 bandits had tied up Maybeth's parents and were filling sacks with money and goods. When they heard the commotion outside, one of them went to the window. "What's happening?" he called to his companions. "Some Indians causing trouble," came the reply. "Boss wants him dead," the bandit sneered. "An Indian, that's what's got you all worked up?" He stepped onto the porch, gun raised, and never saw the arrow that took him in the chest. He fell backward through the door, dead before he hit the floor. His partner cursed and ducked behind the counter, shooting blindly out the window. Toka was moving again, slipping from roof to rooftop, using the skills he'd learned hunting in the mountains. Another arrow, another bandit down, this one with a wound to his leg that left him crawling in the dust. The leader and his remaining men were growing desperate. They grabbed old Mrs. Finch, who hadn't been quick enough to hide, and dragged her into the street. "Show yourself, Indian," the leader shouted, "or the old woman dies." Mrs. Finch trembled in his grip, the barrel of his gun pressed against her temple. Maybeth gasped. Mrs. Finch had been one of the few people who still spoke to her after the town turned against her. The old woman had slipped her extra bread when others weren't looking. "Don't do it, Toka," she whispered, but she knew he would. That was who he was. Sure enough, Toka emerged from behind the church steeple, his bow lowered. "Let her go," he said. "Your fight is with me." The leader grinned. "Drop your bow and step into the street." Toka complied, laying his weapon in the dust. He walked forward, hands raised slightly at his sides. His face showed no fear, only calm determination. "Shoot him, boss," called one of the wounded bandits. The leader raised his gun, still keeping his other arm around Mrs. Finch. "Any last words?" "Indian." "Behind you," Toka said simply. The leader's face twisted in confusion, and that was when Sheriff Davis, despite his wounded shoulder, managed to fire his pistol from where he lay on the boardwalk. The shot caught the leader in the back. He staggered forward, releasing Mrs. Finch, who fell to her knees. In that moment, Toka moved. He lunged forward, tackling the wounded leader to the ground. They struggled in the dirt, rolling over and over. As the leader tried to bring his gun to bear, Maybeth couldn't watch anymore. She ran from her hiding place toward the general store. Inside, she found her parents tied up behind the counter. The dead bandit sprawled nearby. "Maybeth," her mother cried, "what are you doing here?" "Helping," she said shortly, working to untie. "Others, Toka is fighting the bandits." Her father's face hardened at the mention of Toka's name, but he said nothing as Maybeth freed his hands. Outside, the fight continued. 2 bandits were dead, 2 wounded but still dangerous. The leader and Toka wrestled in the street while the 6th bandit took aim at them, trying to get a clear shot at Toka. Sheriff Davis tried to fire again, but his gun clicked empty. Seeing this, young Billy Thompson, only 12 years old, ran out from the barbershop and threw a rock at the bandit, taking aim. It hit him in the head, distracting him long enough for Toka to gain the upper hand against the leader. With a powerful blow, Toka knocked the leader unconscious. He rolled away just as the last standing bandit fired, the bullet kicking up dust where Toka had been seconds before. Toka grabbed his bow from the ground and in one fluid motion knocked an arrow and let it fly. It caught the bandit in the arm, causing him to drop his gun. The man turned and ran, limping toward the horses, tied at the hitching post. "He's getting away," someone shouted. Toka was already moving, another arrow ready. But before he could fire, a shot rang out from the direction of the general store. The fleeing bandit fell face first in the dirt. Everyone turned to see Mr. Carter standing on the porch, a smoking shotgun in his hands. His face was unreadable as he looked at Toka. For a moment, the town was silent. The fighting was over. 3. Bandits lay dead. 2 were wounded and unconscious, and the leader was just starting to stir on the ground. Toka stood in the center of it all, bloodied but unbowed. His shirt was torn, and a bullet had grazed his arm, leaving a streak of red. People began to emerge from their hiding places, staring in disbelief at the scene before them. At Toka, Mrs. Finch was the first to speak. She walked up to Toka, her wrinkled hands trembling but her voice steady. "You saved my life," she said. "Thank you." Toka nodded once, saying nothing. His eyes searched the crowd until they found Maybeth, who was helping Sarah Williams to her feet. Relief flooded his face when he saw she was unharmed. Sheriff Davis managed to stand, clutching his wounded shoulder. "Someone tie up the ones still breathing," he ordered. "They'll hang for what they've done here." As the townspeople moved to secure the surviving bandits, Maybeth ran to Toka. Without caring who saw, she threw her arms around him. "You're hurt," she said, noticing the blood on his arm. "It's nothing," he replied, but his voice was tight with pain. "Let me help you," she insisted. "I know which herbs to use. You taught me, remember?" A small smile touched his lips. "I remember." From the edge of the crowd, Pastor Williams watched with a frown. "This doesn't change anything," he said, loudly. "He's still not one of us." "He just saved all our lives," Mrs. Finch retorted. "Including yours, Pastor, while you were hiding in the church." The pastor's face reddened. "It was God's will that—" "It was Toka's courage," Maybeth interrupted, her voice stronger than it had ever been. Nothing more, nothing less. She led Toka to the water trough, where she began to clean his wound. A small crowd gathered around them, curiosity and confusion replacing some of the usual hostility. Among them was 10-year-old Tommy Jenkins, whose father had been one of the loudest voices against Toka. "Did you learn to shoot like that from your people?" the boy asked, eyes wide with admiration. Toka nodded. "My grandfather taught me. His father taught him." Could you teach me someday?" Tommy asked hesitantly. Before Toka could answer, Farmer Jenkins pushed through the crowd and grabbed his son's arm. "Get away from him," he growled. "Indian or not, I don't want you near him." "But Pa, he saved us," Tommy protested. "I said get." Jenkins pulled his son away, but not before giving Toka a grudging nod. It wasn't gratitude exactly, but it was acknowledgement. From Jenkins, that was something. As Maybeth worked on Toka's wound, an elderly woman approached. It was Mrs. Peterson, the banker's wife who had been one of the first to spread rumors about Maybeth and Toka. "I need help," she said, her voice strained. "My grandson was hit by a stray bullet. It's in his leg. The doctor's not in town and—" She couldn't finish, tears filling her eyes. Maybeth looked at Toka, who nodded. "Show me," she said to Mrs. Peterson. The old woman led them to the bank, where her 8-year-old grandson lay on a sofa, pale and whimpering. The bullet had gone through the fleshy part of his thigh, leaving an ugly wound that was still bleeding. "I need clean cloth, hot water, and whiskey if you have it," Maybeth said, taking charge. "And Toka, I need those herbs you showed me, the ones with the yellow flowers that grow by the river." "I know the ones," he said, already heading for the door. Mrs. Peterson watched him go, then turned to Maybeth. "Will my boy be all right?" "Yes," Maybeth said firmly. "Toka knows which plants can help stop the bleeding and prevent fever. He taught me." Mrs. Peterson looked surprised. "He taught you about medicine?" "He's taught me many things," Maybeth replied, "things his people have known for generations." As they waited for Toka to return, Maybeth cleaned the wound as best she could. The boy was brave, biting his lip to keep from crying out. "You're doing well, Timothy," Maybeth said gently. "Just a little longer." When Toka returned with the herbs, They worked together to prepare a poultice. He crushed the plants with practiced hands, while Maybeth kept the boy calm by telling him stories. Mrs. Peterson watched them work, her earlier disgust replaced by hesitant gratitude. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Why are you helping us after how we've treated you both?" Toka didn't look up from his work. "Because it's right, and because no child should suffer for adults' mistakes," Maybeth added, giving Mrs. Peterson a pointed look. By evening, the town had begun to return to normal, though the day's events had left a mark on everyone. The surviving bandits were locked in the jail, the dead were laid out in the undertakers, and the wounded were being tended to in their homes. Toka and Maybeth sat on the steps of the tanner's shop, exhausted but together. The setting sun painted the pale bluff surrounding Hollow Rock in shades of gold and pink. "Why did you come back?" Maybeth asked, leaning against his shoulder. "You could have been killed." Toka was quiet for a moment. "I came back for you," he said simply, "because you were still here." Tears filled her eyes. "I never asked you to risk your life. You didn't have to." They sat in silence as darkness fell over the town. In houses all around them, people were talking about what had happened. About Toka, about the Indian who had saved Hollow Rock. Sheriff Davis found them there an hour later. His arm was in a sling, his face drawn with pain and exhaustion. "I came to say thank you," he said awkwardly. "What you did today, well, not many men would have done it, white or Indian." Toka nodded in acknowledgement. "You're welcome to stay in town tonight," the sheriff continued. "Both of you, I can arrange rooms at the boarding house." "We're fine here," Toka said. The sheriff hesitated, then added, "Things might be different now, after what happened." "Will they?" Maybeth asked, unable to keep the doubt from her voice. "Some folks are talking," Davis admitted. "Mrs. Finch has been telling anyone who'll listen how you saved her life. And the Peterson boy is doing well thanks to your herbs." After the sheriff left, Maybeth turned to Toka. "Do you think he's right? Could things change?" Toka looked out at the dark, quiet town. "People don't change easily, especially their fears." "But some might," she insisted. "Mrs. Finch already has, and Tommy Jenkins looked at you like you were some kind of hero." "One day doesn't erase months of hatred," Toka said gently, "or years of distrust between our peoples." Maybeth knew he was right, but part of her couldn't help hoping. For the first time since the town had turned against them, she felt a small flame of possibility. "We should still leave," Toka said, breaking into her thoughts. "Head north like we planned." "I know," she said softly, "but maybe we could wait a few more days, see if anything really has changed." Toka didn't answer, but he put his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close against the night's chill. Neither of them noticed Mr. Carter watching from across the street, his face troubled, or Pastor Williams huddled with several church elders, their expressions dark as they glanced toward the tanner's shop, or Mrs. Peterson sitting by her grandson's bedside, torn between a lifetime of prejudice and the undeniable fact that Toka and Maybeth had saved the boy's life. Change was coming to Hollow Rock, but whether it would be enough or in time remained to be seen. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Maybeth woke to find Toka already up, rebuilding the small fire outside the barn where they had spent the night. "Good morning," she said, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as she joined him. He handed her a cup of coffee, a luxury they rarely had. "Mr. Finch brought it earlier," he explained, "and some bread." Maybeth's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Mr. Finch did?" Toka nodded. "I said his wife insisted." As they ate their simple breakfast, people began to pass by on their way to open shops or start the day's work. Some still crossed to the other side of the street to avoid them. Others nodded briefly in acknowledgement. A few even called out good morning. "It's strange," Maybeth said. "Yesterday they wouldn't look at me. Today they remember who helped them when they needed it," Toka finished. They were just finishing their meal when Timothy Peterson appeared, walking with a slight limp, but otherwise looking well. "Ma says thank you for fixing my leg," the boy said shyly. "It hardly hurts at all now." "I'm glad," Maybeth smiled. "But it was Toka's medicine that helped you." Timothy turned to Toka with wide eyes. Pa says Indians know secret magic. Is that true? Toka's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. Not magic, just knowledge passed down from our ancestors, about plants and animals and how to live with the land. Could you show me sometime? Timothy asked eagerly. Before Toka could answer, Mrs. Peterson appeared around the corner, her face anxious. Timothy, what are you doing here? Come away at once. The boy's face fell. But Ma, they helped me. Now, Timothy. She grabbed his hand, pulling him away, but then she paused and turned back. Thank you, she said stiffly, for my grandson. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the day wore on, more people came by. Some, like Sheriff Davis, came to thank Toka again for his bravery. Others were curious, wanting to see up close the man who had single-handedly fought off the bandits. A few, like Mrs. Williams, came to thank Maybeth for protecting her daughter. Sarah, during the fighting. I always thought you were a good girl, Mrs. Williams said, her eyes darting nervously to Toka. Even with your choices. Maybeth bit back a sharp retort. These small steps were progress, even if they came with backhanded compliments. By afternoon, word had spread that Toka knew about healing plants. Mrs. Finch arrived, with her arthritis-twisted hands, asking if he knew anything that might help the pain. Then came Mr. Johnson with his persistent cough, and young Alice Cooper with a rash on her arms. Toka helped them all, showing Maybeth which plants to gather and how to prepare them. Together, they created salves and teas, explaining to each person how to use them. You're good at this, Maybeth said as they worked. Teaching people, Toka shrugged. My grandfather is the real healer. I know only the basics. It's more than anyone here knows, she pointed out. As the sun began to set, Maybeth noticed a group gathering outside the church. Pastor Williams stood on the steps, his Bible clutched to his chest, addressing the crowd. I don't like the look of that, she murmured to Toka. His face was grim. Neither do I. They watched as the pastor's voice rose, his words carrying across the quiet street. We must not forget who we are, brothers and sisters. One good deed does not wash away the threat these people pose to our way of life. Several in the crowd nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable. I knew it wouldn't be that easy, Toka said quietly. Maybeth took his hand. No, but it's a beginning. As they turned away from the scene at the church, a small figure darted across the street. Toward them, it was Tommy Jenkins. My pa says to give you this, the boy said, thrusting a package wrapped in brown paper into Toka's hands. He says it ain't much, but it's what he can do. Inside was a hunting knife with a worn but well-cared-for blade. Tell your father thank you, Toka said, clearly surprised. Tommy nodded eagerly. He says he still don't approve of… Well, you… No. The boy glanced between Toka and Maybeth. But he says a man who fights like you did deserves respect. After Tommy ran off, Maybeth looked at Toka. See? Things are changing. Toka tested the edge of the knife with his thumb. Some things, not everything. It's a start, she insisted. He slipped the knife into his belt. Maybe, but I still think we should leave, Maybeth. Soon. Why? Now that people are beginning to accept you. Some people, he corrected. Others are gathering at the church right. Now listening to your pastor, tell them why they should fear me. He took her hands in his. And even those who are grateful now may change their minds tomorrow. Maybeth knew he was right, but the thought of leaving, of giving up just when things might be improving, was hard to accept. 2 more days, she pleaded. Let's give it 2 more days. Toka studied her face, then nodded slowly. 2 days, but then we go north like we planned. As night fell over Hollow Rock, change continued to brew. In some homes, families argued about the Indian who had saved them. In others, people wondered if perhaps they had been wrong. And in the church, Pastor Williams and his followers made plans to ensure that Hollow Rock remained as it had always been, closed to those who were different. The battle with the bandits was over, but the real fight for Maybeth and Toka was just beginning. Morning after Toka's promise to stay 2 more days, Maybeth woke to the sound of voices outside the barn. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. After everything that had happened, she still feared the worst, a mob come to drive them away, or worse. "Toka," she called softly, but he wasn't beside her. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, she cautiously approached the barn door. What she saw stopped her in her tracks. Toka sat on an overturned crate surrounded by a small group of children. Tommy Jenkins was there, along with Timothy Peterson and several others. Toka was showing them how to fashion a small whistle from a piece of wood, his knife moving deftly, as the children watched in fascination. "When it's done right," he was saying, "it sounds like a meadowlark. My people use it to signal each other. When hunting, can you make one for me?" little Emma Wilson asked, her eyes wide. Toka smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "I'll make one for each of you. But first, you must learn the right way to thank the tree for giving its wood." Maybeth leaned against the doorframe, watching. This was a side of Toka she'd rarely seen, patient, almost gentle. The children showed none of their parents' fear or distrust. To them, he was simply the brave man who had saved their town, a man who knew exciting things they wanted to learn. Across the street, Maybeth noticed Mrs. Wilson watching anxiously from her porch. The woman clearly wasn't comfortable with her daughter being so close to Toka, but she hadn't called Emma away either. It was a small victory. "Good morning," Maybeth said, stepping outside. The children turned, greeting her with smiles. They had never treated her with the same contempt as their parents, though some had been told to avoid her. "Miss Maybeth, Mr. Toka's teaching us Indian things," Emma announced excitedly. "I can see that," Maybeth replied, smiling at Toka over the children's heads. "My pa says I shouldn't be here," Tommy Jenkins confided in a low voice. "But he also says Mr. Toka is the bravest man he ever saw. So I figure it's all right." Before Maybeth could respond, Sheriff Davis appeared, walking slowly up the street. His arm was still in a sling, but he looked better than he had yesterday. "Morning," he called as he approached. The children scattered at the sight of his badge, running off with promises to return later for their whistles. "Sheriff," Toka acknowledged, putting away his knife. Davis looked uncomfortable. "I need to talk to you both. It's about what happened at the church last night." Maybeth tensed. "What's Pastor Williams done now?" "He's stirring up trouble," the sheriff admitted. "Says the town needs to take a stand before more Indians come." He glanced at Toka apologetically. "His words, not mine." "We've heard worse," Toka said evenly. "Well, he's got some people listening. They're saying yesterday was just luck, that we can't trust—" Davis trailed off, clearly embarrassed. "Can't trust Indians," Toka finished for him. "It's an old story. Sheriff," Davis shifted his weight uneasily. "I came to warn you, some of the men have been drinking since last night. They're worked up. I'd feel better if you two stayed out of sight today." "We haven't done anything wrong," Maybeth protested. "No, you haven't," the sheriff agreed. "But whiskey and fear make for bad decisions. I'd hate to see anyone get hurt after what you both did for this town." After Davis left, Maybeth turned to Toka. "Maybe we should leave today," she said reluctantly. "Not wait the 2 days." Toka considered this, his face unreadable. "We'll wait," he said finally. "Running now would only prove the pastor right about me." "About us," she corrected, taking his hand. He nodded, squeezing her fingers gently. "About us." They spent the morning gathering more healing herbs from the riverbank. Word had spread about Toka's knowledge of plants, and several people had asked for remedies. It gave them a purpose, a way to be useful that even the most prejudiced townspeople found hard to criticize. As they worked, Maybeth noticed Toka's silence. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment, carefully placing yarrow leaves in his pouch. "My grandfather," he said finally. "He warned me this would happen, that no matter what I did, these people would never see me as anything but an Indian." "Some have changed," Maybeth argued. "Mrs. Finch treats you like a hero, and Mr. Johnson said his cough is better already from your tea." "A few," Toka conceded, "but not enough. Not your father, not your pastor." Maybeth had no answer for that. Her father had still not spoken to her, despite what had happened with the bandits, and Pastor Williams was actively working against them. "We could go to your grandfather's camp," she suggested. "Just for today. Stay away from town until things calm down." Toka shook his head. My grandfather left yesterday. He said it wasn't safe to be near Hollow Rock right now. He left without you? Maybeth was surprised. He knows I won't leave without you, Toka said simply, and he knows you're not ready to go. The weight of his sacrifice hit Maybeth anew. Toka had given up everything for her, his family, his people, his safety, all because she couldn't let go of her hope that Hollow Rock would change. I'm sorry, she whispered. I've been selfish. Toka looked at her, his dark eyes serious. No, you've been faithful. To your home, to your people, even when they weren't faithful to you. You're my people now, she said, her voice strengthening. You and me. That's what matters. He smiled slightly, but there was sadness in it. Let's finish. Gathering these herbs, people are waiting. When they returned to town an hour later, they found Hollow Rock unnaturally quiet. The usual bustle of the main street was subdued. People hurried about their business, avoiding eye contact. Something had changed. I don't like this, Toka murmured. As they walked toward the tanner's shop, they were almost there when Mrs. Finch hurried toward them, her face worried. Thank goodness I found you, she said breathlessly. You need to know what's happened. What is it? Maybeth asked, dread building in her stomach. It's Pastor Williams. He's called a town meeting for this afternoon. Says it's about the Indian problem. Mrs. Finch's wrinkled face creased with concern. They're voting on whether to ask the territorial authorities to remove all Indians from the area. He can't do that, Maybeth protested. Toka hasn't done anything wrong. He says it's not about what's happened, but what could happen. Says having Indians nearby puts the town at risk. Mrs. Finch shook her head. I tried to speak up, remind folks how Toka saved us, but they wouldn't listen. When is this meeting? Toka asked quietly. 3 o'clock at the church, Mrs. Finch replied. Sheriff Davis says you have a right to be there, to speak for yourself. Toka nodded his thanks. As Mrs. Finch hurried away, Maybeth turned to him, her eyes blazing with anger. This is wrong, she said, after everything you did. It's what I expected, Toka replied, his voice calm though his eyes were troubled. Fear is stronger than gratitude. Then we'll fight it, Maybeth declared. We'll go to that meeting. We'll make them listen. For the first time, Toka looked uncertain. Words won't change their minds, Maybeth, not about this. Then what, we just give up? Let them drive you away? He was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. We'll go to the meeting. But if the vote goes against us, and it will, we leave today. No more waiting. Maybeth wanted to argue, but the determination in his eyes stopped her. She nodded slowly. All right, if that's what happens, we'll leave today. The hours until the meeting passed with agonizing slowness. Maybeth and Toka delivered the herbs they'd gathered to those who had asked for them. Some, like old Mr. Johnson, received them gratefully. Others wouldn't open their doors, telling them to leave the remedies on the porch. News of the meeting had spread throughout Hollow Rock. Everyone was talking about it, some openly, others in hushed whispers that stopped when Maybeth and Toka approached. At 2:45 they made their way to the church. A crowd had already gathered outside, people standing in small groups, talking quietly. When Maybeth and Toka appeared, a hush fell over them. Sheriff Davis met them at the church steps. Folks are worked up, he warned. Pastor's been talking all morning. I'll do what I can to keep order, but... We understand, Toka said. Inside, the church was packed. Every pew was filled with people standing along the walls. Pastor Williams stood at the pulpit, Bible in hand, his face severe. Beside him sat Mayor Wilson, looking uncomfortable, and several church elders, including Mr. Peterson. Maybeth was surprised to see her parents sitting in the third row. Her mother glanced at her, then quickly looked away. Her father stared straight ahead, his face expressionless. A murmur ran through the crowd as Maybeth and Toka entered. Sheriff Davis led them to a pew near the back, which had been kept empty. I'd say good afternoon, Pastor Williams began once everyone was settled. But there's nothing good about why we're gathered here today. He launched into a speech about the dangers of allowing Indians near their town. He spoke of raids on other settlements, of stolen livestock, and worse. He never mentioned Toka by name, but his meaning was clear. One good deed didn't outweigh the threat. The good book teaches us to be wary of false prophets, the pastor declared, of wolves in sheep's clothing. This Indian may have helped us against the bandits, but who's to say he won't bring his people down on us next week? Next month? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the congregation. Maybeth felt sick. Beside her, Toka sat perfectly still, his face impassive. I propose we vote, Pastor Williams continued, on whether to petition the territorial governor to remove all Indians from the Hollow Rock area, for our safety, for our future. Mayor Wilson stood up, clearing his throat nervously. Before we vote, I think we should allow anyone who wishes to speak their piece. That's only fair. The pastor frowned but nodded reluctantly. Very well. Who wishes to speak? To Maybeth's surprise, Mrs. Finch was the first to stand. I want to remind everyone that I'd be dead if not for that young man back there, she said, pointing to Toka. While most of you were hiding, he fought for us, for all of us. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mr. Johnson rose. Next, his voice raspy despite Toka's herbal tea. My cough's been plaguing me for 3 winters. Nothing helped till that Indian showed me which plants to use. Seems to me there's good in knowing such things. A few others spoke in favor of Toka. Mrs. Williams, thanking him for protecting her daughter. Blacksmith Cooper acknowledging Toka's bravery. Young Timothy Peterson, who had to stand on the pew to be seen, declaring that Mr. Toka fixed my leg when it was shot. But there were other voices too. Farmer Jenkins, despite his grudging respect for Toka, worried about his cattle. Mr. Baker feared for his business if word got out that Hollow Rock welcomed Indians, and Mrs. Peterson, though grateful for her grandson's life, couldn't quite overcome a lifetime of fear. Finally, Pastor Williams asked, "Does the Indian wish to speak?" All eyes turned to Toka. Slowly he stood. The church fell silent. I have lived near your town for 2 winters, he said, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the room. In that time, I have traded fairly. I have harmed no one. I have taken only what I needed from the land. He paused, looking around at the faces watching him. When bandits came, I fought them because they threatened someone I care about. I would do it again. His eyes found Pastor Williams. You fear what you do? Not understand. That is the way of all people. My people fear what you might do to us, just as you fear what we might do to you. He gestured to Maybeth. But this woman taught me that fear can be overcome, that people can change. I wanted to believe her. The silence in the church was absolute. Even Pastor Williams seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Will you leave if we ask you to? Mayor Wilson finally asked. Yes, Toka replied simply. I have no wish to stay where I am not wanted. More murmuring broke out. Some looked relieved, others troubled. And the girl? Someone called out. Will she go with you? Before Toka could answer, Maybeth stood up beside him. My name is Maybeth Carter, she said, her voice shaking slightly but growing stronger. I've lived in Hollow Rock all my life. You all know me. Or you thought you did until I fell in love with a man you decided was beneath me. She looked around at the familiar faces, people she'd grown up with, who now looked at her like a stranger. Toka is a better man than most I've known. He's brave and kind and wise, and yes, if you drive him away, I will go with him. Her eyes found her parents. Her mother was crying silently. Her father still stared straight ahead, but his jaw was clenched tight. I had hoped, Maybeth continued, that after what happened with the bandits, you might see him differently, see us differently. But I was wrong. She took Toka's hand. So yes, we'll leave. Today. But know this, you're not driving us out because we did anything wrong. You're driving us out because you can't bear to admit you were wrong about us. A heavy silence fell as they sat down. Pastor Williams cleared his throat. I think we've heard enough, he said. Let's proceed with the vote. Mayor Wilson stood again. All in favor of petitioning the governor to remove Indians from the Hollow Rock area, raise your hands. Hands began to rise throughout the church. Maybeth couldn't bear to count them, but it was clear they were the majority. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears. All opposed. Fewer hands this time. Mrs. Finch, Mr. Johnson, the Coopers, a scattering. Of others, not enough. The motion passes, Mayor Wilson announced, sounding like he wished it hadn't. The petition will be sent tomorrow. And the Indian should be gone by nightfall, Pastor Williams added, unable to keep the satisfaction from. His voice Toka stood, pulling Maybeth gently to her feet. We will leave now, he said with quiet dignity. We need nothing from this town. They walked out, heads held high despite the stares following them. Outside, the late afternoon sun was slanting toward the bluffs that had always been the boundaries of Maybeth's world. Soon she would see what lay beyond them. I'm sorry, she whispered as they headed toward the tanner's shop to gather their few belongings. I thought they would change. Toka's face was solemn. Some did, but not enough. They had just reached the shop when they heard running footsteps behind them. Turning, they saw Timothy Peterson hurrying toward them, his mother following more. Slowly. Are you really leaving? The boy asked, his young face troubled. Toka nodded. Yes. Today. But who will make medicine when people get sick? Who will teach us about the plants and animals? Your town has a doctor, Toka reminded him. He's not as good as you, Timothy said with a child's brutal honesty. Mrs. Peterson caught up to them, slightly out of breath. Timothy, don't bother. They're busy. It's all right, Maybeth assured her. We're just gathering our things. Mrs. Peterson hesitated, then said, I wanted to thank you again for saving Timothy and to say, she faltered, to say I'm sorry for how things turned out. Are you? Maybeth asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Did you vote against the petition? Mrs. Peterson looked away. I couldn't. My husband... I understand, Maybeth said, though she didn't. Thank you for coming to say goodbye. Inside the tanner's shop, they packed quickly. There wasn't much to take. Some clothes, a few books, the herbs they'd gathered, and the knife Farmer Jenkins had given Toka. Everything Maybeth owned from her old life could fit in a single bag. Mr. Finch appeared as they were finishing. I heard what happened, he said gruffly. It ain't right after what you did for us. It's done, Toka said simply. The old man nodded. Well, I brought you something for the road. He held out a small pouch. It ain't much, just some food. And a little money, the missus insisted. Maybeth felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you, she said, taking the pouch. For everything. For giving me work when no one else would. You're a good girl, Maybeth, Mr. Finch said. Always were, don't you forget that. By the time they stepped outside again, the sun was sinking lower. A small crowd had gathered in the street. Not hostile this time, but watchful. News of the vote had spread. Sheriff Davis was there, holding the reins of a horse. Thought you might need this, he said. It belonged to one of the bandits. No one's claimed it. Toka nodded his thanks, taking the reins. Mrs. Finch pushed through the crowd to press a small package into Maybeth's hands. Some food for the journey, she explained, and a bit of my lavender soap. I know how you like the smell. One by one others came forward. Mr. Johnson with a warm blanket, Blacksmith Cooper with a small cooking pot, even Tommy Jenkins sneaking away from his father to give Toka an arrowhead he'd found. It ain't much, but we wanted to help, Mrs. Finch said, tears in her old eyes. Not all of us agreed with the vote, you should know that. Thank you, Maybeth said, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. We won't forget. Toka secured their belongings to the horse, then helped Maybeth mount. He was about to swing up behind her when a voice called out, Wait! Everyone turned to see Mr. Carter, Maybeth's father, pushing through the crowd. Mrs. Carter was behind him, her face streaked with tears. Maybeth's heart pounded, after all. This time, after all that had happened, had her father finally come to make peace? Mr. Carter stopped a few feet away, his face unreadable. For a long moment he just looked at his daughter, as if memorizing her features. Pa, Maybeth said softly. Her father reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. Your grandmother's brooch, he said, his voice rough. It should have been yours on your wedding day. Maybeth stared at the pouch, then at her father. You're giving it to me now, even though I'm leaving with Toka? Mr. Carter didn't look at Toka. You're still my daughter, he said stiffly. No matter what choices you make. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was something. Maybeth took the pouch with trembling fingers. Thank you, Pa, she whispered. Mrs. Carter stepped forward then, unable to contain herself any longer. She reached up to touch Maybeth's hand. "Be safe," she pleaded. "Please be safe." "I will, Mama," Maybeth promised. "Toka will take care of me, and I'll take care of him." Her mother nodded, stepping back to her husband's side. Mr. Carter gave Toka one long, measuring look, then nodded once, the barest acknowledgement, before turning away. Toka mounted behind Maybeth, his arms coming around her to take the reins. The crowd parted to let them pass. As they rode slowly toward the edge of town, faces watched from windows and doorways, some hostile, some sad, some merely curious to see the girl who had chosen love over belonging. At the town limits, Toka stopped the horse and looked back at Hollow Rock. The setting sun painted the buildings in gold and shadow, making the town look almost beautiful. "We don't have to go," he said quietly, so only Maybeth could hear. "If you want to stay, if your father—" "No," she interrupted, her voice steady. "I made my choice. I choose you." He tightened his arms around her briefly, then urged the horse forward, toward the northern trail that would take them beyond the bluffs. They had ridden perhaps 100 yards when they heard the sound of running feet behind them. Turning, they saw a small figure racing after them, Emma Wilson, her blonde braids flying. "Miss Maybeth," she called, "will you come back someday?" Maybeth looked at the child, then at the town beyond, where Emma's mother stood watching anxiously. She thought of all she was leaving behind, her home, her family, the only life she'd ever known. And all that lay ahead, uncertainty, hardship, but also freedom and love. "I don't know, Emma," she answered honestly, but as they rode away, Maybeth looked over her shoulder one last time at the place that had both shaped her and shunned her, and she smiled. Behind her, Toka felt the change in her body, the release of tension. "North?" he asked. "North," she agreed. "To your people." They rode in comfortable silence as the shadows lengthened across the trail. The bluffs loomed ahead, golden in the dying light. Beyond them lay a world Maybeth had only dreamed of. "What's it like?" she asked. "Where we're going?" "There are forests," Toka told her, "and lakes so big you can't see the other side. In summer, the meadows fill with flowers of every color. In winter, the snow makes everything quiet and clean." "It sounds beautiful," she said. "It is. My mother's sister will welcome you. Her heart is good." Maybeth leaned back against his chest, feeling safe despite the uncertainty ahead. "Will your grandfather be there?" "Yes, he's probably already told everyone about you." There was amusement in Toka's voice. "The white woman who chose an Indian." "The woman who chose love," Maybeth corrected. As darkness fell, they made camp in a small clearing just beyond the bluffs. Toka built a fire while Maybeth unpacked the food Mrs. Finch and the others had given them. It wasn't much, but it would see them through a few days. They ate in companionable silence, watching the stars appear one by one. Maybeth found herself thinking of all the nights she'd looked at these same stars from her bedroom window in Hollow Rock, never imagining she would one day be sitting beneath them with a man like Toka. "Any regrets?" he asked, as if reading her thoughts. She considered the question seriously. "I regret that they couldn't change, that they couldn't see you as—" "I do." She reached for his hand. "But I don't regret choosing you. I never will." He kissed her then, gently at first, then with a passion that spoke of all they had endured and all that lay ahead. When they finally broke apart, his eyes reflected the firelight. "I will make you happy," he promised. "Whatever it takes. You already have," she assured him. Later, as they lay wrapped in blankets beneath the vast sky, Maybeth thought about the town behind them. Had they made a difference, however small? Had they planted seeds that might someday grow into understanding? She didn't know. But as she drifted towards sleep in Toka's arms, she found that it mattered less than it once had. They had each other. They had tomorrow. They had a chance to build something new. It was enough. What neither of them knew as they slept beneath the stars was that back in Hollow Rock, things were not quite settled. In the church, a heated argument was taking place. In the general store, Maybeth's father stared at a photograph of his daughter as a child, and on the northern road, just beyond the town limits, a single rider was preparing to follow their trail. The story of Maybeth and Toka was not yet over. In fact, it was just beginning. Dawn broke over the northern trail, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Maybeth woke to the sound of birdsong and the gentle crackling of a small fire. Toka was already up, cooking something that smelled delicious. "Good morning," he said, noticing her stirring. "I found wild onions and rabbit. Not much, but it will give us strength for the journey." Maybeth sat up, running her fingers through her tangled hair. "How long until we reach your people?" 3 days, maybe 4, Toka replied. "Depends on the weather." As they ate breakfast, Maybeth found herself thinking of Hollow Rock. Were people gathering at the general store now, discussing their departure? Was her mother arranging flowers for Sundays? Church service? Did her father miss her even a little? "You're quiet," Toka observed. "Just thinking about home," she admitted. "I mean about Hollow Rock." Toka nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's hard to leave the only place you've known." "Not as hard as I thought it would be," she said, surprised to find it was true. "Not with you." They packed up quickly after eating, eager to cover as much ground as possible. The day promised to be warm, the trail clear. As Toka saddled the horse, Maybeth walked to a nearby stream to fill their water skins. That was when she heard it, the distant sound of hoofbeats. Someone was coming up the trail behind them. "Toka!" she called, her heart racing. "Someone's coming!" He was beside her in an instant, bow in hand. "Get behind me," he said, his voice tense. They waited, watching the bend in the trail. The hoofbeats grew louder, then slowed to a walk. A moment later, a lone rider appeared. "Sheriff Davis," Maybeth said in disbelief. The sheriff reined in his horse, raising a hand in greeting. He looked tired, as if he'd been riding all night. "Morning," he said, dismounting stiffly. "Thought I might catch up to you before you got too far." "Why?" Toka asked, his bow still ready. "Has something happened?" Davis held up his hands. "No trouble, I come in peace." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you, Miss Carter, from your mother." Maybeth took the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a letter and something small and hard. She tipped it into her palm. Her mother's silver locket, the one with a tiny portrait of Maybeth as a child inside. "Read the letter," Davis suggested gently. Maybeth unfolded the single sheet of paper, recognizing her mother's neat handwriting. "My dearest Maybeth, by the time you read this, you will be far from Hollow Rock, and perhaps that is for the best. Your father and I raised you to be a good Christian woman, but perhaps we forgot to raise you to be true to your own heart. I cannot pretend to understand your choice, but I am trying. The man you love saved our town when others hid. That counts for something, even to those who won't admit it. Sheriff Davis has agreed to bring you this letter and my locket. Keep it close, and remember that whatever else happens, you are loved." Last night after you left, your father and I had words with Pastor Williams. Others joined us, the Finches, the Johnsons, even Mrs. Peterson. The petition may still go forward, but not with our names on it. It may be too late for you to come home now. Perhaps that door is closed. But know that our hearts are not. Be safe, my daughter. Be happy with all my love. Mother tears blurred Maybeth's vision as she finished reading. She clutched the locket tightly, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from her heart. "She says they argued with Pastor Williams," she told Toka. "My parents and some others. They wouldn't sign the petition." Toka's expression softened. "A small victory." Sheriff Davis cleared his throat. "It was more than small. Half the town was still at the church when I left, arguing about whether the vote was fair. Pastor Williams was red as a tomato, shouting about heathens and savages. And the other half?" Maybeth asked. "Split," Davis admitted. "Some still agree with the pastor. Others are having second thoughts, especially after seeing how you were treated." He looked at Toka. Farmer Jenkins was particularly vocal, said any man who'd faced down 6 bandits deserved more respect than he got. "It doesn't change the vote," Toka pointed out. "No," Davis agreed, "but it might change Hollow Rock, given time." He shifted uncomfortably. "That's actually the other reason I came. Mayor Wilson asked me to tell you that if you wanted to return, both of you, he'd make sure you weren't bothered." Maybeth looked at Toka, hope rising in her chest. "We could Go back? Toka's face remained impassive. To what? Whispers and stares? Children told to avoid us? No. He turned to Davis. Tell your mayor we appreciate the offer, but we have made our choice. The sheriff nodded, as if he'd expected this answer. I thought you might say that, can't blame you. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small bag that clinked with the sound of coins. This is from Mr. Finch and some others. They wanted you to have it for the journey. We don't need charity, Toka said stiffly. It's not charity, Davis replied. It's thanks for what you did. Won't you take it, at least for Miss Carter's sake? After a moment's hesitation, Toka accepted the bag with a nod of thanks. One more thing, Davis said, reaching into his saddlebag again. He pulled out a package wrapped in brown paper. From your father, Miss Carter. He gave it to me after your mother wrote her letter. Maybeth took the package with shaking hands. Inside was her father's hunting rifle, the one he'd carried since he was a young man, along with a box of ammunition. He said to tell you the trail north can be dangerous, Davis explained. Said you know how to use it. Fresh tears sprang to Maybeth's eyes. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12, saying every frontier woman should know how to protect herself. It was one of her fondest memories of him, patient, proud when she hit her first target. Tell him thank you, she whispered. Tell him I'll make him proud. Davis nodded. I will. He mounted his horse, tipping his hat. Good luck to you both. I hope you find what you're looking for. They watched him ride back toward Hollow Rock until he disappeared around the bend. Then Toka turned to Maybeth, his expression questioning. We could go back, he said quietly, if that's what you want. Maybeth looked down at the letter, the locket, the rifle. Pieces of home, pieces of who she had been, but not who she was becoming. No, she said, her voice growing stronger. My mother understands. My father is trying to. That's enough for now. She took Toka's hand. I want to see those forests and lakes you told me about. I want to meet your people. A smile broke across his face, transforming it. Then let's go. The journey north was harder than Maybeth had expected. The trails grew steeper, the nights colder. Game was scarce, and twice they had to shelter under trees during heavy rainstorms. But there was a freedom in it too. No disapproving glances, no whispers behind hands. Just the two of them, the horse and the vast wilderness stretching before them. Toka taught her how to move quietly through the forest, how to read animal tracks, how to find edible plants when game was scarce. At night, by the campfire, he told her stories of his people, their history, their beliefs, their ways of understanding the world. My grandfather says all things are connected, he explained one evening as they watched the stars appear. The trees, the animals, the people. What happens to one happens to all. Is that why you came back to Hollow Rock? Maybeth asked. When the bandits attacked? Toka was quiet for a moment. Partly, he admitted, but mostly I came back for you. Ons. The fourth day, as the sun was beginning its descent, they crested a hill and Toka reined in the horse. Below them stretched a wide valley, a silver river cutting through its center. Near the river, smoke rose from several lodges, a small encampment, nestled among the trees. My people, Toka said simply. Maybeth felt a flutter of nervousness. Will they accept me? They will, he assured her. My grandfather has prepared them, and my aunt is a kind woman. As they rode down into the valley, children spotted them and ran to meet them, calling out in a language Maybeth didn't understand. Toka answered them, his voice warm with affection. What are they saying? Maybeth asked. They're welcoming us, he told her, and they're curious about you. They've never seen hair the color of sunset before. Maybeth touched her red-gold hair self-consciously. Will I learn their language? In time, Toka promised, just as they will learn more English. The adults of the camp were more reserved than the children, watching with cautious eyes as Toka and Maybeth dismounted. An elderly man stepped forward. Toka's grandfather, his face deeply lined but his eyes sharp and clear. You have returned, he said in accented English, and you have brought the woman. This is Maybeth, Toka replied, his hand finding hers. She has chosen to come with me. The old man studied Maybeth intently. "Why?" he asked bluntly. Maybeth swallowed her nervousness. "Because I love your grandson," she said, her voice steady. "Because he is a good man. Because with him I am more than I was alone." Toka's grandfather continued to stare at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "Good answer," he said. "Welcome to our fire." A middle-aged woman stepped forward next. Toka's aunt, Maybeth guessed. She spoke rapidly to Toka in their language. "My aunt welcomes you," Toka translated. "She says, any woman brave enough to leave her people for love is a woman worth knowing." Gradually, the others came forward to greet them. Some spoke a little English, others relied on gestures and smiles. A young woman about Maybeth's age took her hand and led her to one of the lodges, indicating through gestures that Maybeth could wash and rest there. Inside, the lodge was clean and comfortable, with furs and woven blankets arranged around a central fire pit. The young woman, Kimmy she called herself, brought Maybeth a bowl of water and some dried berries to eat. "Thank you," Maybeth said, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers who owed her nothing. Kimmy smiled, her English halting, but clear. "Toka say you good woman, strong heart," she touched her own chest. "We sisters now." Tears sprang to Maybeth's eyes. "Sisters," she repeated, taking Kimmy's hand. That evening, the entire camp gathered around a large fire. Food was shared: roasted venison, wild roots, berries preserved from the summer. Toka's grandfather told stories that Toka translated for Maybeth. Children played nearby, occasionally darting forward to touch Maybeth's hair in wonder before running away giggling. "They like you," Toka said, his arm around her shoulders. "I like them too," she replied, surprising herself with how true it was. Later, as the celebration wound down, Toka's grandfather approached them again. He spoke at length to Toka, who listened with growing seriousness. "What is it?" Maybeth asked, when the old man had finished. "He says we cannot stay here long," Toka explained. "Army soldiers have been seen to the west. The government wants all Indians on reservations now." "But that's not fair," Maybeth protested. "This is your land." "It was," Toka agreed sadly. "Now it belongs to people like those in Hollow Rock, people who fear what they don't understand." "Where will we go?" "North," Toka said. "Further north, to the big lakes. My mother's people are there. The soldiers don't go there often. We'll be safer." Maybeth thought of the journey they had already made, the hardships they had already faced. And now they would have to travel even further, face even more uncertainty. "When do we leave?" she asked, her voice steady. Toka's eyes warmed with pride. "A few days. We need to prepare." "Are you sure, Maybeth? This life, it won't be easy." "I'm sure," she said, without hesitation. "Wherever you go, I go." The next few days were a flurry of activity as the camp prepared to move. Maybeth worked alongside the women, learning to pack the lodges efficiently, to preserve meat for the journey, to identify plants that could be used for medicine. She was clumsy at first, but eager to learn, and the women were patient teachers. In Fur, the evenings she sat with Toka's aunt, learning words in the Lakota language. It was difficult, but Maybeth was determined. This was her life now. These were her people now. On the night before they were to leave, Toka took Maybeth to a small hill overlooking the camp. The stars were bright overhead, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. "I have something to ask you," he said, taking her hands in his. "Among my people, when a man and woman choose each other, they make promises before the elders. It is like marriage in your church, but under the open sky." Maybeth's heart quickened. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I am asking if you will make promises with me," Toka said, "to walk beside me all our days, to share what comes, good or bad." "Yes," Maybeth said without hesitation. "Yes, I will make promises with you." The ceremony took place at dawn. The entire camp gathered in a circle, with Toka and Maybeth in the center. Toka's grandfather presided, speaking words in Lakota that Toka translated for Maybeth. He asks if we come with clear hearts and open eyes, Toka explained. "If we understand that the path ahead may be difficult." "We do," Maybeth replied. The old man nodded, then spoke again. He asks if we promise to help each other, to be strong when the other is weak, to be kind when the other is troubled. We do, they said together. More words followed, and then Toka's aunt stepped forward with a beautiful blanket woven in blue and red patterns. She draped it around both of their shoulders, binding them together. Now we are one before my people, Toka said softly. And before God, Maybeth added. The camp broke into cheers and singing. Gifts were presented, a knife for Toka, a necklace of polished stones for Maybeth. Food was shared, and the children danced around them, scattering flower petals at their feet. In that moment, looking at the faces of these people who had accepted her so completely, Maybeth felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced, in Hollow Rock. Here she wasn't the general store owner's odd daughter or the girl who loved an Indian. She was simply Maybeth, Toka's chosen one, a woman with a strong heart. The journey north began the next day. The entire camp moved together, a slow caravan of horses and people. Maybeth rode beside Toka, no longer a visitor but a member of the tribe. The women taught her their songs as they traveled. The children brought her interesting stones and feathers they found along the way. One evening, as they made camp near a small lake, Toka's grandfather called Maybeth to sit beside him. Through Toka, who translated, the old man told her stories of the land they were passing through, how it had belonged to their ancestors, how it had been taken, how they had adapted and survived. He says our people are like the river, Toka translated. We may change course when we meet obstacles, but we continue to flow. We find new paths. Tell him I'm honored to flow with you, Maybeth replied, to be part of your river. The old man smiled when Toka translated her words. He reached out and placed his weathered hand on Maybeth's head in a gesture of blessing. They traveled for 2 weeks, making their way steadily northward. The weather grew colder, the landscape more rugged. But Maybeth found she didn't mind the hardships. Each day brought new discoveries, new connections with the people who had become her family. And then, one crisp autumn morning, they crested a hill and saw it, a vast expanse of water stretching to the horizon, glittering in the sunlight. The big lake, Toka said with satisfaction. We have arrived. On the shore of the lake was another encampment, larger than the one they had left. As they approached, people came out to meet them, calling greetings. There were embraces, tears of joy, exclamations of surprise as Toka's relatives recognized him. You've been gone too long, an elderly woman said, clasping his face between her hands. And who is this? She asked, turning to Maybeth. My wife, Toka said proudly. Maybeth. The woman studied Maybeth for a long moment, then smiled. She has kind eyes, she declared. Welcome, daughter. That night, as they sat by the fire in their new home, Maybeth leaned against Toka's shoulder. Are you happy? She asked. Yes, he said without hesitation. Are you? Maybeth thought of Hollow Rock, of her parents, of the life she had left behind. There was still a small ache when she remembered, but it was fading. In its place was something new, a sense of purpose, of rightness. I am, she said. I made the right choice. Toka kissed her gently. We both did. 5 years later, the small cabin stood on the edge of the forest, smoke rising from its chimney. Behind it, the great lake, stretched to the horizon, its waters dark blue in the fading light. A child's laughter rang out, a little boy of about 4 running across the clearing with a toy bow in his hands. Thomas, Maybeth called from the doorway. Time to come in. Dinner's ready. The boy looked up, his dark eyes, so like his father's, sparkling with mischief. One more shot, Mama, please. Maybeth smiled. One more, then inside. She watched as Thomas took careful aim at a tree stump, his small face screwed up in concentration. The arrow, really just a straight stick, fell well short of the target, but the boy cheered anyway. Did you see, Mama? I almost got it. Almost, she agreed, holding out her hand to him. You're getting better every day. Inside the cabin, Toka was setting plates on the table. The years had been good to him. He stood straighter, smiled more often. The wariness that had always shadowed his eyes in Hollow Rock was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. How's my little warrior? He asked as Thomas bounded in. I hit the tree stump 3 times. the boy announced proudly. 3 times, that's very good. Toka ruffled his son's hair. Soon you'll be ready for a real bow. They sat down to eat, a stew of rabbit and wild vegetables, fresh bread that Maybeth had baked that morning. As they ate, Thomas chatted about his day, the fish he'd seen in the shallows of the lake, the eagle that had soared overhead. Toka and Maybeth exchanged smiles over their son's head. This was their life now, simple but good, far from the prejudices of Hollow Rock. They lived at the edge of the larger encampment, in a cabin Toka had built when Thomas was born. They had the best of both worlds, the privacy of their own home, and the community of the tribe. After Thomas was tucked into bed, Toka and Maybeth sat by the fire. He was carving a small wooden horse for their son, his hands moving with practiced skill. She was sewing a patch onto Thomas's winter coat. The quiet domesticity of the scene still sometimes amazed her. How far they had come from those first difficult days. A rider came to the camp today, Toka said, breaking the comfortable silence. From the south. Maybeth looked up. What news? The railroad is coming. They're building a line that will pass near Hollow Rock. The name still had the power to make. Her heart beat a little faster. Is that good or bad for the town? Good, I would think, Toka replied. It will bring more trade, more people. Maybeth nodded, returning to her sewing. She rarely thought of Hollow Rock these days, though she still kept her mother's locket and occasionally wrote letters that she had no way of sending. The rider brought something for you, Toka added, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges as if it had traveled far. It's from Sheriff Davis. Maybeth took the paper with trembling fingers. Inside was a short note. Miss Carter, or Mrs. Toka, as I suppose you are now, I hope this finds you well. Hollow Rock has changed some since you left. The railroad is coming, and with it new ideas. Pastor Williams passed last winter. The new pastor is a younger man, more open-minded. Your parents are well. Your father finally hired help at the store. Your mother asks about you whenever I see her. If you ever wish to visit, I believe you would find a different welcome than before. With respect, Sheriff John Davis. Maybeth read the note twice, then handed it to Toka. He says we could visit, she said softly. That things have changed. Toka read the note carefully. Do you want to go back? Maybeth looked around their cabin, at the cradle in the corner that would soon hold their second child, at the drawings Thomas had made that decorated the walls, at the life they had built together. Not to stay, she said, but perhaps to visit. I'd like my parents to meet their grandson and their new grandchild when it comes. She laid a hand on her growing belly. Toka considered this. It would be a long journey, and we can't be sure of our welcome despite what Davis says. I know, Maybeth acknowledged, but Thomas should know both sides of his heritage, both parts of who he is. Toka was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. We'll go in the spring after the baby comes. A short visit. Maybeth smiled, reaching for his hand. Thank you. Later, as they lay in bed, Toka pulled her close. Are you happy with our life here, he asked. Do you ever regret your choice? Maybeth thought of the day they had ridden out of Hollow Rock, of all that had happened since. The hardships, yes, but also the joy, the freedom to love without judgment, the family they had created. Never, she said, kissing him softly. You are the choice I will always make. Outside, the moon rose over the great lake, casting a silver path across the water. In the forest, an owl called. And in the small cabin, Maybeth and Toka slept, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next, a return to Hollow Rock, a new baby, the continuing challenges of their life together, they would face it as they had faced everything else. Together, the end.